The day my husband was laid to rest began with a sky the color of ash, quiet, still, and heavy, as if even the clouds understood the weight pressing down on our family. I had always imagined that when the moment came, if it ever did, I would be able to stand tall for him. But grief has a way of curling around your ribs and pulling you downward, and every breath that morning felt like lifting a weight I wasn't prepared to carry. His name was Daniel Ellis, and he had been my husband for 32 years. We met in college, fell in love over cheap coffee and shared textbooks, and built a life that was simple, imperfect, and profoundly ours. Together we raised our son Michael, who had flown in from Chicago the moment he heard the news. He stood beside me now at the gravesite, tall like his father, steady like him too, though I could see the grief tugging at his jawline. There aren't many sounds at a funeral. Most people think of sobbing, but really, there is mostly silence. The sound of breath, the shifting of shoes on grass, a distant bird, and the quiet, careful voice of the officiant trying to speak gently about a man who meant the world to me. When the final words were spoken and the small group began dispersing, I remained standing, staring at the headstone that still looked too new, too sharp, too wrong. Someone placed a hand on my shoulder, it might have been Michael, or maybe my sister, and whispered that we should go home, get some rest. I nodded, even though rest seemed like the last thing the world could offer me. Back at the house, the afternoon passed in a blur. People came by, offering casseroles and condolences, speaking softly as though my grief was a fragile creature that might shatter under too much noise. I appreciated them, but their presence felt like an echo. Everyone left by early evening, giving me the privacy they thought I needed, and maybe I did, but the silence that filled the house afterward felt like stepping into a cavern. This was the first night since the day I married him that I would sleep without knowing Daniel existed somewhere nearby. That thought wrapped itself around me like a cold fog. I sank into the couch in the living room, still wearing the black dress from the funeral. The house smelled faintly of flowers people had brought, white lilies and roses set carefully on the dining table. The ticking of the old wall clock suddenly seemed louder than ever, marking seconds I didn't want to count. I closed my eyes, trying to let the quiet settle, when suddenly there came a knock at the door. Soft, hesitant. I froze. Michael had left an hour earlier to rest at the hotel, promising he would be back in the morning. My sister was already on her flight home. No one was supposed to be here. Another knock, this one barely louder than the first. I considered not answering. Grief makes strangers out of even familiar things like doors and knocks and footsteps. But something nudged me to stand, to gather myself, and walk toward the entry. When I opened the door, I did not recognize him at first. A young man stood there, maybe 22 or 23, hands shoved deep in the pockets of a worn jacket. His hair was a little longer than I remembered, and his face had the beginnings of stubble. He looked older, more grown, but his eyes, kind, warm, almost shy, were unmistakable. "Mrs. Ellis," he asked softly, "do you remember me?" And suddenly I did. "Evan Parker," I breathed. He smiled, a small, gentle curve of the mouth. "Yeah, it's been a while." Evan was one of Michael's closest friends in high school, a boy who spent countless afternoons in our kitchen, raiding our snack drawer and laughing at jokes I barely understood. He had a quietness to him that always tugged at something in my heart, a boy who seemed grateful for every kindness, no matter how small. "I'm so sorry," he said quickly, eyes dropping to the porch floor. "I heard about Mr. Ellis. I'm really sorry." "Thank you," I said, my voice thinner than I wanted. "Do you want to come in?" He hesitated, glancing over his shoulder as though unsure he should intrude. But then he nodded. Inside, he stepped carefully, almost reverently, like he expected the house to crumble if he moved too fast. I noticed he held something in his hand, an envelope, creased at the corners. "Please, sit," I offered, gesturing toward the kitchen. Somehow the living room felt too heavy, too full of shadows and memories. The kitchen, even in grief, held a little life. Maybe because that's where so many moments had unfolded over the years, birthday cakes, homework sessions, morning coffee with Daniel. I put the kettle on for tea, grateful for something to do with my hands. Evan sat at the table in the same spot he used to occupy as a teenager, back when he and Michael would argue about video games and school assignments and which local pizza shop made the best crust. He looked older now but still carried that quietness around him like a familiar coat. "How've you been?" I asked, pouring hot water into 2 mugs. He took the cup gently. "I'm okay. I'm working full-time now. Got a place not too far from here." That's good, I said, genuinely glad for him. He glanced around the kitchen, his eyes lingering on the family photos displayed near the refrigerator. One in particular, a picture of Daniel grilling in the backyard, laughing, smoke swirling around him, seemed to draw his attention. Mr. Ellis he was really good to me, Evan said quietly. More than most people knew. I folded my hands around my mug, feeling the warmth seep into my palms. He thought very highly of you. Evan swallowed, a flicker of emotion crossing his face. He helped me a lot in high school. I never told you this, but things weren't easy at home back then. He'd talk to me sometimes when he drove me and Michael around. He always had advice, or stories, or just a way of making things feel less scary. I felt something tighten beautifully and painfully at the same time in my chest. Daniel had always been that way. Quietly generous, steady, a man who gave without expecting anything back. I didn't know that, I said softly. I don't think he wanted anyone to know, Evan admitted. But I never forgot. There was a moment of silence, not uncomfortable, just full of things that didn't need words. Then Evan reached into his jacket and took out the envelope. I came because, well, I found something. And I thought you should have it. He pushed the envelope toward me on the table. The paper was aged, the edges slightly yellowed, the handwriting unmistakably Daniel's. My breath caught. Where did you get this? I whispered. Evan rubbed the back of his neck. Mr. Ellis gave it to me a few years ago. Said I should hold on to it and give it to you only when the time came. I stared at the envelope, stunned. Why you? I asked, not out of accusation, but genuine curiosity. He said I'd know when the right moment was. That I should bring it to you when you needed it, not before. Emotion prickled at my eyes, but I forced myself to breathe steadily. May I asked, my voice trembling slightly. Of course, he said, his tone respectful and warm. I opened the envelope carefully, as though afraid it might crumble. Inside was a single sheet of paper covered in Daniel's familiar slanted handwriting. My dearest Margaret, it began. I exhaled shakily. Evan looked away politely, giving me space. The letter was simple, heartfelt, and unmistakably Daniel. He wrote about love, not dramatic, sweeping romance, but the quieter kind. The kind woven through routines and years. He wrote about memories we shared, about how proud he was of the life we built, about how he wanted me to continue living after he was gone, not because he expected me to move on quickly, but because he hoped I would find new reasons to smile, even in small ways. At the end of the letter, he wrote, if you are reading this, it means our journey on this earth has shifted. But please know, every good day you have ahead of you is a day I would have wanted for you. And if Evan brought you this, thank him for me. I always believed in that young man. Take care of yourself, my love. You deserve every kindness this world can offer. The tears came then, slow at first, then steady. Not the choking kind that leaves you breathless, but the kind that feels like release. When I looked up, Evan was watching me with soft eyes, concern etched in his expression. Thank you, I whispered. He nodded. I'm glad I could bring it. We sat for a while longer, talking about memories of Daniel. Some were small, almost insignificant, like the way he hummed while fixing things around the house. Others were bigger, family trips, proud moments, lessons he taught not just Michael, but Evan too. At one point, I brought out an old photo album I hadn't opened in years. We flipped through it together, smiling at pictures of summers filled with backyard barbecues, graduations, school projects gone wrong, and moments I had forgotten I captured. Time moved gently in that kitchen. As the evening deepened, Evan stood. I should let you rest, he said. I walked him to the door. Before he stepped out, he turned back. Mrs. Ellis, if you ever need anything, even just company, I'm nearby, please don't hesitate. His sincerity warmed something inside me. Thank you, Evan, really. After he left, I sat back at the kitchen table, holding Daniel's letter to my chest. The house still felt empty, but the emptiness wasn't as dark as before. The letter was a reminder, of love, of continuity, of the idea that grief doesn't erase the warmth left behind. Later that night, I went into Daniel's old workshop and carefully placed the letter into the memory box where I kept our most cherished things. Not to hide it, but to honor it. And the next morning, for the first time since he passed, I woke with a sense of gentle purpose. I brewed my coffee, opened the curtains, and let the sunlight spill into the kitchen. Life wouldn't be easy, but I wasn't entirely alone. Kindness had found its way to my door when I needed it most.